Let me ask you something. When you sit down to work each day, does it feel like you're leading a business or does it feel like you're just trying to survive your to-do list? So if your days are feeling filled with emails, messages, tasks, fires to put out, and things that feel urgent but not always important, you're not alone. And here's what I've noticed after years of coaching small business owners is most people don't struggle because they aren't capable. They struggle because they're operating like an employee in their own business instead of the CEO or the CEO mindset. And so today I want to talk about that shift, the one mindset change that really I feel like can really pivot how we show up as a leader. Because the moment you stop thinking only about what needs to get done today, and you start to reframe that perspective of thinking like the CEO of your life, the CEO of your role, the CEO of your business, your clarity improves, your confidence grows, and your results follow that. So I want to welcome you back to your Dream Coach podcast, Hey Dreamers, and welcome to any of our new listeners. I'm Shayla Wey, and I'm a small business coach, a growth strategist, and believer that your dream life starts the moment you lead like you mean it. This podcast is all about leadership, fulfillment, and growth, because when those three pillars align, you don't just get more done, you really build something meaningful. And so I want to really dive into and talk about the CEO within you and why thinking bigger than your to-do list is the key to sustainable success. And so I have seen to-do lists be the core of what so many business owners get stuck in. And I know that I can be guilty of this mindset too once in a while is to-do lists, no matter who I am coaching, are never ending. And I think it can feel defeating sometimes when we create these lists and then they never get accomplished because we're always adding. And that's just to be expected. And so I always will start my week off with a professional to-do list, personal to-do list. So I have time in between meetings and day to day, I'm focusing on other things outside of my professional life too. But what I found is that to-do lists, as they are useful, and I'm a big believer of getting things out of our mind and on paper, they can also be dangerous. And here's what I mean by that is when you live inside your to-do list, what happens is that we can stay reactive instead of strategic. We sort of look at that list and we just start to kind of go through it, step by step. So what happens is that we start to measure our success by busyness and not progress. And you focus more on execution instead of direction. And what happens is we can start to exhaust ourselves feeling like we're never caught up because as soon as we check off one or two things on that to-do list, another handful are added. As we look at the to-do list, a to-do list answers this question is what needs to get done today? However, the CEO mindset answers it differently. And they look at that and they say, what matters right now? So that is a key difference is as much as those lists are key and valuable, how can we approach that list at the beginning of our day, beginning of our week with more intention? And really looking at what is the one thing that's a non-negotiable today that's going to move me closer to the direction of my goals, the growth of my business, growing the leadership of this team. And when leaders stay stuck in task mode, they really cap their growth, not because they lack talent, but because they're spending their energy in the wrong place. And so the CEO mindset is about direction, not control. So one of the biggest mindset shifts that I see in successful leaders is that CEOs don't do everything. And even if you are not labeled a CEO and you're in some sort of a leadership role, this mindset shift is still so valuable. Is when we start to show up as that CEO of our life, then we can decide what matters. And so what I found is that business owners hold on to tasks because it often feels safer to stay busy than a step into leadership. But leadership isn't about controlling every detail. It's about setting direction, priorities, and standards. And when you think like a CEO, you start to ask questions like, well, where am I going? And what season is this business in? And what really deserves my focus right now? And then we can decide, well, what type of things that we do in our roles or on our teams or in the business can be delegated, they can be automated or just simplified. And you stop measuring your value by how much you do and start measuring it by the quality of your decisions. And so when we start to think like a CEO, it will create more fulfillment, not just results. And so when we really think about fulfillment, and again, this is such a core pillar of what I want to focus on all my coaching clients on is because this is where so many of us get stuck, as we get stuck in that high achiever hamster wheel where more and more and more, but then we wake up one day and we go, full for what? More for what? And what does more even mean? And so what I found is that people burn out not because they're working too hard, but because they're working without that clear perspective. Why? What is the vision? For what? And how does everybody play a role in that? And so when you're constantly in task mode, there's no space left to reflect, to celebrate those wins, or to reconnect with why you started. So a CEO mindset creates space to think, time to breathe, room to grow, alignment with those values that we see for ourselves and our company. And fulfillment comes from knowing you're building something intentionally, not just reaching to whatever shows up in your inbox. And you just don't need to work less to feel fulfilled. You need to really work with clarity. Something that I've noticed with some of the high achievers that I work with is that CEOs start to think in seasons and not days. And this is one of the most powerful leadership shifts that I can teach, is that as an employee, we often find employees being stuck in that day-to-day mode, right? They're thinking in days. CEOs will often think in seasons. And so what I found is that when leaders zoom out, stress goes down. And so instead of asking, what do I need to finish today? CEOs will ask, what's my focus this quarter? What season am I in right now? Am I in growth mode? I'm in maintenance mode. Am I rebuilding? Am I scaling? And what can wait until next season? And so this is backed by research of the book by Greg McKeown on essentialism, and where he explains that clarity about what not to do is just as important as knowing what to do. And I think that's huge. So again, I want to just share that phrase again, because that book, Essentialism, is fantastic for this, because we often have clarity of what we need to do. But where I see a lot of leaders and a lot of people that I coach is the clarity on what not to do. What is not something that is worth our time and energy that needs to get done, but is not necessarily something that we need to do. So when you start to think in seasons, even if you look at it in quarters, Q1, Q2, is you really stop judging yourself for not doing everything at once, and you start leading with patience and strategies. So I work with a lot of sales teams. I work with a lot of companies. It's easy to get frustrated, especially when we're measuring results in sales, if a day isn't great. If we don't have a great sales day, or something doesn't go well in the company on one day, it can feel frustrating. But when we zoom out and we take a look at the week, or we take a look at the month, it can feel a lot lighter when we look at it from that perspective. And what happens is that identity that we have, that clarity, really starts to drive that behavior. So why you need to see yourself as a CEO is James Clear talks about this beautifully in Atomic Habits, where he says the most effective way to change your behavior is to change your identity. Your identity is so powerful with how you see yourself. And when I ask this question, and I've talked about this on a podcast a few episodes ago, is we often are really quick to give ourselves a label of the title of our role. And I think it's a really powerful exercise to do for yourself, and even for people that you lead on a team, is what is your identity? Because you won't lead like a CEO until you see yourself as one. And even if you're not in a position to be a CEO right now, is even just the identity of, do I see myself having a CEO mindset? Is treating the part of the business that you lead as your own? How do you show up? Because I always say, especially to my kids, one of my kids is in junior high right now and is just really frustrated with some of the things they have to learn in school. And so I'll often just say, is how you do one thing is how you do all things. And so when we really plant that flag in the ground of our identity, is even if it's not by the title, because I think this goes a lot deeper than just the title, is it really is the mindset shift of taking ownership, is how I see this, is leading like a CEO in your personal professional life. Even if you don't have the title, do you bring that type of energy? Because CEOs, they protect their energy. They make time for thinking. They set boundaries. They focus on leverage, and they lead themselves first. So if you see yourself as the one who has to do everything, your actions will reflect that belief. But when you shift your identity to, I'm the leader of this business, your choices change naturally. And identity creates that behavior, and behavior creates results. And when we start to implement systems and start to build systems, This is so foundational for that CEO mindset, is so that CEOs don't become the bottleneck. And this is where leadership and growth start to intersect. And so when everything runs through you as the CEO or the leader, growth will slow down, pressure increases, fulfillment decreases. And so what I have found is that CEOs don't rely on memory, motivation, or heroics. They rely on systems. Simple systems like weekly planning, clear communication channels, documented processes, really defined roles, and just expectations. So books like Clockwork by Mike Michalowicz and The E-Myth, revisited by Michael Gerber, both reinforce this idea that if your business can't function without you, you don't own a business. You have a job. You own a job. And so this is something, especially with the entrepreneurs I work with, I will challenge them to think about, because when you reflect on that, sometimes that can not feel the greatest when you think of it that way, where you feel so important or you have this significance that you need to feel fulfilled, is that it can feel empowering when everybody needs you. But really, when we take a step back and we think about really what the ultimate goal is that your team and your business should be able to run without you. And that's a huge compliment, by the way. I remember when I heard that, I almost took that personally initially. This was years ago. And I was like, well, what do you mean? I am important and I make a difference. And yes, that's true. But the value of systems is that your business should rise and fall to the level of the systems. So systems don't remove your importance, okay? They just multiply your impact. So it is a next level of leadership that you get to when your business or the area of the company that you lead can run without you. That's a really, really big compliment to you as the leader. Now, prioritize energy really, really well, not just time. And this is a really big one. So high performing leaders don't manage time as much as they manage energy, because you can have all the time in the world and we all have the same amount of hours in the week. All of us have 168 hours in the week. But if your energy is depleted, nothing works. CEOs will ask themselves, well, when am I at my best? And what drains me? And what do I do that really fuels me up? How do I protect my focus? And this ties directly into fulfillment. And this is something how I've designed my schedule, is there's certain things that I have to get done in the morning, because by the end of like even mid-afternoon, I'm just not the same energy level. And so I'll make sure that there's certain parts of what I do in my business and with some of the teams that I work with that happen at certain hours of the day. And that is so valuable. Even if you are listening to this episode as an employee, is you still oftentimes have the ability to design your schedule, and maybe not hours in certain roles, but how do you protect, certain energy throughout your day? How do you check your emails? Is that something that you have constantly buzzing all day? When I talk to coaching clients that share that with me, it gives me anxiety thinking about it buzzing and beeping all day long. So set time, right? Protect your energy to check your emails, maybe in the morning, maybe there's another segment mid-afternoon, and that we're not reactively just going through and putting out fires all day long, right? We're going back to that first thing I talked about is the to-do list, is what's one thing that's going to move my day forward. So we feel fulfilled by the end of the day and we're not just checking things off of a list. And you really can't feel fulfilled if you're constantly exhausted, because energy is hands down one of the most valuable leadership assets that you can have. And it's not just a luxury. And CEOs, I find, always make sure they lead themselves first. And this is something that I'll remind them on our coaching sessions, is what are you doing to pour into you? How are you growing? One of the core pillars in one of the companies that I work with is mindset, and not just mindset in our energy, but mindset in our personal growth. And if we are a leader and we are not putting time to grow, then that's where our business gets really stagnant, because you can't outgrow your own self-leadership. So things that, include discipline or reflections, boundaries, vision, accountability, is that when we are growing, when we are learning, we are fulfilled. And so what I have learned is that the most successful leaders aren't perfect. They're just intentional. And that is so big, is that the intention behind what we do, how we do it, right? Checking in with ourselves, course correcting, learning from mistakes, and not spiraling, just adjusting. Leaders always start inward. And when we start to think bigger than our to-do lists, this expands to our dreams. And this is where your dream framework comes in. When you're stuck in the weeds, dreams shrink. When you think like a CEO, dreams expand. And so dreams don't grow in chaos, they grow in clarity. And so when we start to ask ourselves, what kind of life am I building? And I like to use the word designing the life of your dreams. There's just so much control in that. Is what do you want your days to look like? What do you want your mornings to look like? I remember doing this exercise. Gosh, I was in my early 20s and I was in a leadership meeting with a sales company I was working with at the time. And that was one of our questions, our journaling questions that day. And I remember I might have been 21 or 22. And our task was to journal about our perfect morning. And it's fascinating when I do this with my own clients because oftentimes it's things that are free. It's often things that we actually could do every single day. So things like waking up, going for a walk, having a workout, meditating, journaling, having a coffee, having a slow, intentional start to the day, reading. Okay. And I challenge you to maybe even reflect on that exercise is what does a dream morning look like for you? And you might surprise yourself to say, well, if that's my dream morning, what do I have to do to just make that happen every day? You know, one of the interesting things about the mornings, just on this topic, is I'll often say to people that have bigger goals, well, what time do you have to get up in the morning? And the first reaction is often, oh, I don't know if I can get up that early. And it's so interesting how we've been, in a way, really brainwashed in society to give meaning to a day of the week or a time on the clock. If your alarm says 5 a.m., it's just a number. If the alarm says 10 a.m., again, it's just a number. But we've really wired ourselves to feel a certain way with different hours on the clock that we give energy to. So how do we reframe that and look at that time to say, hey, this is my opportunity clock. This is my opportunity to get up to have the morning that I know is going to serve me best, right? Monday is an opportunity to kickstart my week, right? Days of the week can feel however you want, but let's be intentional, just as a CEO's mindset would be, to have that clarity. And again, as we go through different quarters of our business, we go through different seasons, is what does success even mean in that season? Because your dreams deserve more than just leftover energy. It's always really interesting when we think about the mindset of a CEO is how we put so much energy into designing and planning for business, but we just leave the leftovers for our personal life. And so when we bring that same level of CEO mindset into our personal lives, magical things happen. I've always taken time to design my years, my quarters, my weeks to make sure that what I do in my work life is serving my personal life. And it's one of my core values as a coach is what is this all for? What are the dreams that you do have on your list? Because they deserve that leadership. And if we want to make this practical and really how to activate the CEO within, starting this week, is here are a few CEO level shifts that you can make immediately. Schedule your thinking time, not just task time. It is so easy to fill our time. And I have been there many times where I haven't always protected that thinking time. And as soon as I create that space and I protect that time, it's amazing how innovative and re-energized I feel when I have that space. Starting your week with the key priorities, not emails. If you really take a zoom out for a second and you think about how that even looks or sounds, how fun and energizing is that to get into your week just tackling emails? So how do we create something on a Monday or the start of your day that isn't just replying to emails? What tasks or could you just even spend a little bit of time diving into first before we just jump into the emails? Starting to get really good clarity of just one task that you could really delegate or simplify. And asking ourselves, is this the CEO mindset work or is this more employee type of work? And really reminding ourselves that we need to protect our energy because it matters. You don't need to overhaul everything. Oftentimes, if we're really consistent with key metrics, key things that we know are going to drive our business and give us that growth we need, we can see huge changes. So we just need to reflect internally and lead differently because you are the CEO. You're the CEO of your life. You're the CEO of the role that you are in, or you very well may be the CEO of your own business. So whether you act like it or not, here's the truth that I want to leave you with. Is you already are the CEO of your life. And for many of you, in some way, your business. The question is, are you leading like one? Are you really thinking like one? thinking bigger than just a to-do list doesn't mean doing less. It really means doing what matters. So when you lead with clarity, growth becomes way more sustainable. Fulfillment becomes more possible, and dreams start to feel achievable again. So if this episode resonated with you and you're ready to strengthen your CEO mindset, I would love to invite you into the LFG Business Academy on School. It's completely free. So inside you will get access to the mini leadership series where I break down how to lead yourself, your business, and your team with confidence and clarity. And you can grab the link in the show notes, and I'd love to see you inside. And thank you as always for spending this time with me today. I love being able to share some of my takeaways from clients that I work with and really allowing you to take some tools and thoughts into your teams, into your businesses, so that you can continue to build the life of your dreams. Because your dream life does start with the way that you lead, the way that you live, and the way that you grow. I will see you next time on the Dream Coach podcast.